So I will now introduce our first presenter, Ms. Emma Roberts. Welcome to the podium.
Have you ever wanted to take a break from reality, to leave a situation, or to just clear your mind, go somewhere else, a place where you don't have to worry about any situations, just in general? I'm kind of feeling like that right now too. I will admit, but I can tell you, everyone feels that at a point of their life, and it's called escapism. C.S. Lewis says that all such escape is from the same thing, immediate, concrete actuality. He also claims, well, from that quote, he claims that escapism is an important thing because we're all escaping from the same thing, which is reality. We all want to get rid of, well, not get rid of, but just take a break every once in a while. Sigmund Freud, he's a neurologist, and he also was the creator of a process called psychoanalysis. He talks about escapism, and he says that men and women cannot subsist on the scanty satisfaction which they cannot extort from reality. We simply cannot do without auxiliary constructions, meaning that it is necessary to have an escape of sorts because it is healthy for the mind and psychological, and to have a good psychological state. And in order for it to remain beneficial for a psychological mind, an escape must also have limits that must be established. The first limit that should be taken into consideration is that an individual cannot become unassociated with reality in any way. They cannot become isolated or per se distant to their peers or their family members or their job, anything like that. Because if that happens, the escape no longer is beneficial for that individual. Secondly, an escape cannot be used solely to avoid responsibilities. It cannot be used as an excuse to get rid of those things, because then the escape would be taken advantage of in that case, and it would not serve its full potential. Lastly, an escape must be something that again helps improve the general state of mind of an individual. And if that happens, then the individual will also be able to improve their self-image and the image of others because they have a healthy mindset, which is why it will also be beneficial in that way. However, there can be dangers to an escape, especially if those limits are not taken into consideration. One example of a dangerous escape is if something like drugs or alcohol are used to reach an escape. And there's a book that we read this year in my philosophy called Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And in that book is an example of a dangerous escape of sorts, because the individuals of the society are on this drug called soma, and its purpose is to have a feeling of happiness, of a constant happiness for an individual, and essentially they're on it their entire lives. And they also, the drug, while they are on the drug, is their reality that they know, that they have come to know because of the drug, because they're on it constantly, and they don't know what the true reality looks they've never experienced it, and because the limits that were mentioned were also not taken into consideration. There is a beneficial side also, which outweighs the dangerous parts. In a parable also that we read this year called Allegory of the Cave, written by Plato, there's a quote, and Plato writes that, "Down you must go then in turn to the habitation of others, and accustom yourselves to their darkness. For when you have grown accustomed, you will see 1,000 times better than those who live there, and you will know what the images are and what they are of, because you have seen the realities behind the just and beautiful and good things." This quote is describing that reality can be a place of darkness at times, really dark places, really hard, struggling times with lots of problems, but an escape can provide a sort of light in that darkness to help see reality more clearly and to help it be more bearable and worth living. C.S. Lewis also describes a feeling called joy, one that he associates with escapes. He says that joy is an unsatisfied desire which is itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. I call it joy, and it has one characteristic, the fact that anyone who has experienced it will want it again, meaning that escapes are a very appealing thing and topic, even if they're not recognized entirely, because they provide that sense of joy with them that comes with the escape. And people will want to experience that feeling again more than once, because it's just an insatiable want that is with it, the escape. Escapes can also be appealing because they have less conflict that is associated with them than reality does, meaning that a person can have more power in an escape because they can have control of what goes on and how it is reached because of that lack of conflict. And back to the joy, the feeling of joy, you can know that an escape is good and that it will prove beneficial to your psychological health in general if you feel joy when you enter an escape. If you have an escape through drugs or alcohol, it may produce a feeling of happiness or pleasure, which is different from joy, and which is why drugs and things of those sort are an example of a bad and immoral escape as well. So escapes can be beneficial or they can be dangerous, but they will most likely remain beneficial if you keep the limits in consideration. So, if you have ever felt the feeling of wanting to escape reality or just to take a break from life, then know that you're not alone and it's up to you what you do with it and how it affects you.
Right. This is the point where we invite questions from the audience or clarification, further interest. Always have a couple, but I will yield to the audience to get started.
One. Is there a standard measurement of some sort that might go across the board as far as for a person to recognize when they've gone from what is safe and escapism to what is not? What addiction, whatever? Is there some kind of standard measurement that would tell you I'm in trouble?
As far as a standard measurement, that would be a little harder to identify, but if you follow the limits that were mentioned or determined, then hopefully that state won't ever become a problem. But to answer your question, for the most part, if an individual just becomes completely unassociated with reality in general, they become just totally isolated by themselves, then that is the point where I would say an escape has become dangerous.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Emma. I guess one of your examples for an escape would be the drug user, right? Or the example of a person on drugs. Now, can you provide us with a different type of an example for an escape, perhaps on the other end of the spectrum, the beneficial?
An example for the beneficial side?
Yeah.
Well, when I used Allegory of the Cave by Plato, I was trying to get across that in that story there is individuals who are set inside of a cave and they're watching this show, and one of the individuals gets let outside of the cave. So in a more literal sense, an individual kind of literally escapes the cave, which was their reality, and they go outside of the cave and they discover something way better than what was inside of the cave in general, something that they probably would have never found out or known of if they had not taken that extra step.
Literally into the light.
Literally, yeah, but same thing. Jesse?
What is a good escape? Like, you told us what a bad escape looks like, an addiction to drugs and alcohol. What is a good escape? Like, what activity would be considered a good escape?
I think anything along the lines of something that makes an individual a better person in a way, because drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing, they destroy a person, bit by bit, slowly, and even if it's not recognized. But something that helps an individual become better, even in just the smallest sense, it can vary from a number of things. I would say it could be something like sports or even reading.
Yeah, that's good.
Or a philosophy class could be.
So Emma, you talked about joy versus happiness, and one thing that I was wondering, do you think we need to experience some level of pain in our life to understand what joy really is?
I do, actually. I agree with that. And with one of the quotes I said from Allegory of the Cave again, where you have to go into the habitation of the others and accustom yourselves to the darkness in order for you to see the good and the beautiful and the just things. I think that's the whole point of reality in general, is to help you know how to deal with those things, but an escape can be the way of making it better, making a better way to deal with those things.
Because sports done right are painful, right? In a lot of ways, and so, but you feel like you experience, the more pain you feel, you can experience a deeper amount of joy as you escape in, say, a sports scenario.
I would say it's more the case of that pain is worth what I get out of it, because it's not the pain that's the escape, it's what causes it. That sounds kind of weird, but it's the sport itself that is the escape, and it's worth it, and I would take the pain for as long as I can still have that escape.
But it's interesting in the Brave New World scenario, they're not, do they ever experience pain, or is Selma meant to keep them from the pain?
It's meant to, yeah, to not allow that, to kind of give them the perfect life, in a sense, which is why that's a dangerous way to go, because they never know what it feels like on the other side of it.
What's the difference?
Do you think that there is a link between joy and happiness?
A link between it? A link? I'm not sure, but there is a difference. I can tell you that much. Because I think happiness is more of a choice. You can choose to be happy. It's up to you whether you are or not. But joy, it happens. It's kind of an uncontrolled feeling, but you don't know how to receive it necessarily, which is why you want it so much. I would say, but that's a really good question. Thank you for that.
I'm thinking about American society today at large. You said something sort of like when you were talking about Plato's cave, that to know reality is to know darkness. Do you sense in American society today at large perhaps a fear of darkness? And what do you think about, do you think American society is perhaps pursuing to excess escapism because they're afraid of the dark?
That's a good question, and I would say that in a general sense, yes, the society now is afraid of the darkness, but I also think they don't necessarily know how to take away that fear. Maybe because the idea hasn't been presented to them, or they just don't recognize it. But I think it is a big issue that not many people recognize is apparent. I'm sorry, yeah, I do agree that is a problem.
Do you have any opinions on perhaps some steps that could be taken? Say in a smaller group of people, it's hard to fix the world's problems or the nation's problems, but what do you think could be a few small steps that could be taken to not be so afraid of the darkness?
I think it's all about the willingness to want to get better as a person, to yes, the hardships and the darkness does have to be experienced, but if that's all that is experienced, then there really is not going to be any improvement in a person's life. So they have to want to get out of that state. They have to be willing to do whatever it takes to overcome that, or just to improve it in any sort of way. Specifically, I'm not sure. I think that's just up to the individual and what kind of a person they are to begin with, because there's all kinds of different escapes that could be taken and paths that could be taken. So thank you for your question. Yes.
Well, as timekeeper, I have to be aware. But this, I know, the more I interact with this topic, the more intrigued I get. So I can't resist one more question either. So let's go with it.
Is there a point where pursuing a positive version of escapism crosses a line into the point where it becomes a new version of reality, to where going back, because you were saying that there's a boundary when the reality starts to change and you become disconnected from reality, then escapism is no longer good. But do you feel that there's a point where you're using a positive escape and you cross a line and that becomes your new reality, and that's okay?
If you're using a positive escape, but if it's used too often, in a sense, that it becomes your new reality, then it becomes a harmful escape, because you lose sight of what the true reality is and what the truth of that is. And in that case, it may be hard to escape your escape, I guess, because you no longer recognize the difference between them, even if it did start off as something good and beneficial.
And what would you say is the most compelling reason for staying attached to your true reality, or the original reality, or, if you will, real reality? Why do we need to stay attached to that?
I think it's because in reality you can always improve yourself. Through the hardships that it presents, you can always get better, you can always learn from them, you can always change something, you can do something about it. Sometimes you just need that extra step, that extra light to help you see what that is.
I think it has something to do with responsibilities that we have in that reality. You mentioned social connections early on.
Yeah, I think we all have a responsibility to continue to improve ourselves, to become a better person, to be the best we can be, as we have somewhat talked about and learned in moral philosophy as well. But that can't happen if the escape is a only constant factor.
I've got to have one more. It's interesting. I just heard a quote or a report, and it was hard for me to believe this, but Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's everyone knows who he is. They had this Isaac Asimov debates, I think it was last month, and he said it's very likely that our entire universe, we are but a simulation of some higher being. And so it's interesting that, like, to define reality, and we're talking about postmodernism, that do you think, are we, like, we can just go too far as like what reality is when we have people like that who are so in the forefront saying, this just all might be, we're all just ones and zeros in a simulation for some higher being. Yeah. So what are we escaping from?
He's escaped his reality.
Well, that was one of the premises in our class, right? That there is an objective reality that we don't have to deal with. Reason has to start there.
Right. So your topic is so pertinent that there is a reality that's tangible. When we've got voices now that are coming in saying, what are we even?
Well, thank you very much. I do have an I Have a Dream speech, of having, in fact, we did this a couple times this year. We had a Friday forum, we did it once last year, of having just one presentation on a Friday every 2 weeks or once a month in our new building, where community's invited to sit and we just have one of these. And so we can go an hour and a half on just one presentation, one idea. So we're getting a little taste of that. Hold on to that joy and cash it in as we go along. Okay, moving along to our next presenter.